this is Zach from Peeling Back Data, and today we're going to be looking at error codes in ggplot 2 and how to fix them. So, the first thing that we're going to do, as always, is load library ggplot 2, and then we're going to load in our example dataset, in this case MT cars. So the first error that I'm going to look at is when you have color or other options within aesthetics that are giving you unexpected results. So let's run the mistake. So you can see here that in this case we wanted to color the points blue, but we've actually got it colored red, which is weird, and now we have this legend. So what's going on here? So what's happening is that we actually have color within the aesthetics, and now it thinks that blue is the name of a variable, and then it will set that to the default color, which in this case is red. So what we need to do is make sure that color is outside of these aesthetics, and so when we run this version here, we get this result. So when you're doing things like this, you need to just make sure that any sort of changes, like other options might be size and things like that, just need to make sure that those are outside the aesthetics. So the second issue that we might run into is continuous value supplied to discrete scale. So let's have a look. So we get that error showing up in the console there. So what this means is that the value supplied is continuous when it should be discrete. So what I'm talking about here is, in this case, color. Color, when put on the aesthetics, is looking for a factor. And in this case, gear, if we have a look, is still a numeric. So what we want to do is change that. And the way that we can change that, there's two ways. So we can either change it when specifying the color, so we can put factor or as.factor here. So let's have a look at that. And I've also made some slight changes here. So I've changed the color palette to be blues, and I've just changed the label to be gear. Now the second thing that we can do to change that is we can actually manually alter the MT cars dataset such that gear is a factor. So we can go ahead and do that, and we can have a look here and see that now gear is a factor with 3 levels. And now we can run this plot, and we still get that same result, which is nice. I'm just going to quickly reload data empty cars because I don't want gear to be a factor for the rest of these examples. So the third thing that we have here now is invalid argument to unary operator. This is a bit of a confusing error message, so I'll go ahead and run that. And now looking at this code, you wouldn't actually be able to easily tell what's wrong with it. But what we can see here is there's actually 2 plus symbols next to each other. So what we need to do is just get rid of one of these, and then it'll be fine. So this is just an error that can come up when you have multi-line code and you keep wanting to add new variables. So just make sure that you never have a plus symbol to the left of your new line. And when you're adding new options, like I wanted and the labs here, you just do it like that. Cool. Let's look at number 4. So in this case, the error is stack count can only have an X or Y aesthetic. So what's going on here? So let's run the mistake line. So you can see that we're using data empty cars. X, we have as.factor gear, which is correct, which means we're using gear as a factor. And then Y is a numeric, which is the problem. So geom doesn't know how to interpret this initially. But if we change the stat here, so using stat equals summary, we can actually change that function. So now we get this nice result. And if you check out my previous video about bar and column plots, I sort of go in how you can alter this function to make your bar and column graphs look nice. Okay, number 5. Discrete value not as factor when on the x-axis. So let's have a look at the error. So you can see here that on the bottom it has all these numbers, so 3, 4, all the way up to 9, and we don't really want that because cylinder is a discrete variable with just 3 levels. So what we can do is use as.factor, which is what we used in the last example, and what you can see is to get a much cleaner result, and it's much clearer what is happening. 6. Insufficient values in manual scale. So, and then it'll say y needed, but only x provided. So let's look at the mistake. So the problem here is that we're coloring by gear, and gear has 3 levels, and in scale color manual, which I'll go into more depth in another video, we've only supplied 2 colors here. So we actually need to supply 3, and if you want to check the number of levels that a factor has, you can use this code here, and this will actually tell you what all the unique levels are in the data. So we can see that we've got 3 here, so the levels are 3, 4, and 5. And I've also made a note here that the order that you supply these colors is also important. So let's now run this code with 3 colors on scale color manual, which is great. And if we wanted the 3rd level to be black, we can come in here and do that. Number 7 is geom requires the following missing aesthetics x and y. So let's go ahead and run the code. So this is when we're trying to add a geom label or geom text to the plot, which can be a nice way to give handy labels to your graph to indicate maybe a specific value at points on the graph, or to provide grouping information. So the problem here is that geom label needs aesthetics to know where to put these labels. And now generally, as you can see in the correct version, this will run because by default there's this option called inherit aesthetics, and that by default is true. So we'll inherit the aesthetics from the initial ggplot call. But the problem here is that we've got geom_point as a separate command here, which is where the aesthetics are, and in this case geom_label doesn't know how to retrieve that information. So what we can do is we can either do this code here, or we can go and alter this code and simply say x equals mpg and y equals the displacement. And now we'll get that to run. Okay, thank you for watching. This is a shorter video, and I'm just getting back into the swing of doing more videos. So subscribe if you want to see more videos, and I'll be back soon.